The first time I pulled this mouse out of the box, I genuinely thought someone at Corsair had sent me an empty demo shell. I sat into my desk and just stared at it for a few seconds because nothing that light should feel this solid when you squeeze it. At 36 grams, the Sabre V2 Pro feels like holding a piece of desk foam, except when you press down on the main buttons. They snap back with a crisp, tactile click that feels completely normal. The sound is slightly hollow, more resonant than the deeper thunk you'd get from something like the Logitech G Pro X Superlight 2. But it's not cheap or tiny, it's just different. The matte black shell has this dry texture to it, almost like unfinished plastic, which keeps your palm from sliding but does start to show a faint oil buildup after a couple hours of gaming. When you flip it over, two half-circle skates glide across the mat with almost zero resistance. It's so smooth that I actually swapped them out for the larger replacement pads included in the box just to slow it down a bit and give myself more control. The symmetrical shape sits right in that medium compact zone where it doesn't force your hand into any specific grip style, though the side buttons on the left make it clearly right-handed. If you squeeze the sides with deliberate force, you can feel the thin plastic flex just slightly, and when the charging LED lights up, you can actually see it glow faintly through the right-click button. But during normal use, none of that matters. It holds its shape, feels sturdy, and never once gave me the impression it would crack or warp under pressure. The first match I played after setting this up was in Counter-Strike 2, and the difference hit me within the first few flicks. My crosshair was snapping the targets faster than my brain expected it to. Not because the sensor was doing something magical, but because there was basically no inertia fighting against my hand. The Marksman has sensor tracks at 33,000 DPI and 750 IPS, which is more than enough for high sensitivity players. And I never once felt any jitter or acceleration smoothing, even during those panic 180-degree turns when someone flanks you. Compared to the 60-gram Logitech G Pro X Superlight I'd been using before, this thing just disappears in your hand. It's the difference between moving the mouse and just moving your aim. The 8000Hz polling mode is something I tested out of curiosity, and while I'm not good enough to actually feel the 0.125 ms latency difference in any meaningful way, I did notice my CPU usage spiked by about 11% during high-speed tracking. For most people, the standard 1000Hz mode is going to feel identical in practice, and it keeps the battery alive for around 70 hours instead of just 16. One thing that kept annoying me though is that there is no dedicated DPI button. You have to hold right click and one of those side buttons for 3 seconds to cycle through your DPI stages, which feels clunky when you're used to just tapping a button under your thumb. The side buttons are pill-shaped and sit flush with the shell, so they're easy to find by feel but don't protrude enough to accidentally press. The scroll wheel has this rubberized texture with clearly defined steps, and while it doesn't have a free spin mode or side click functionality, it does exactly what you'd expect from a competitive gaming mouse. When you look at the product page for the Sabre V2 Pro, Corsair really leans hard into the 36-gram weight and the 8000Hz polling as the marquee features, and I get why. Those are the numbers that grab attention, but what's interesting is how much they undersell the actual build quality. They mention is their lightest mouse ever and show off the sensor specs, but they don't really talk about how rigid the shell actually is compared to other ultralight mice that either punch holes everywhere or feel like they might crack it if you grip them too hard. The battery life chart shows the trade-off between 70 hours at 1K and 16 hours at 8K, which is fair, but they frame it like you're supposed to be using 8K mode all the time, when in reality most players are going to leave it at 1K and forget about it. I also noticed that they list the 100 million click switches as a durability feature, which does line up with how solid the clicks feel. But they barely mention the fact that there's no Bluetooth support or dedicated DPI switch, two things that might actually matter to someone who's comparing this against other options. After about a week of use, the Sabre V2 Pro became the mouse I'd instinctively reach for whatever I sat down at my desk. It didn't matter if I was jumping into a match or just editing a document, the weight felt so natural that using anything heavier afterward made my hand feel sluggish. The grip tape that comes in the box ended up being more useful than I expected because without it the mouse felt too light, like it was going to slip out of my hand during a fast flick. Once I applied the tape to the sides, it gave me just enough friction to feel locked in without adding any noticeable weight. The web-based customization tool was surprisingly fast and intuitive. No need to download IQ or keep some bloated app running in the background. You just open a browser, connect to the mouse, then remap buttons or adjust DPI stages in a few clicks. I set up profiles for different games and never thought about it again. One thing I didn't expect to appreciate was how little fatigue I felt after long sessions. With heavier mice, I noticed my wrist starting to ache after a few hours. But with this, I could play for most of the evening and never feel that strain. You don't really notice how much it changes your setup until you go back to something else. I plugged in my old 68-gram mouse for a day just to compare, and it genuinely felt like I was dragging a brick across the mouse pad. The lack of a dedicated DPI button is something I kept running into, especially when switching between desktop use and gaming. Having to hold two buttons for the 3 seconds just to cycle through sensitivity stages feels outdated, and it's one of those small things that only becomes obvious after a few hours. The thin plastic shell is another minor quirk. If you press hard on the sides or bottom, you can feel it flex slightly, and the charging LED is visible through the right click button when it lights up. It's not a deal breaker, but it does remind you that weight reduction came at the cost of material thickness. And while the 70-hour battery life at 1K polling is solid, the fact that it drops to just 16 hours at 8K means you're basically forced to pick between longevity and the headlight feature. If you're the kind of person who prioritizes speed, precision, and minimal resistance in competitive shooters, the Sabre V2 Pro is absolutely worth it. It's built for fast flicks, low latency tracking, and long sessions without wrist fatigue. But if your day is mostly productivity work with some casual gaming on the side, the lack of Bluetooth, the missing DPI button, and the shorter battery life in 8K mode might make other ultralight options feel more versatile. There's a quiet satisfaction that comes from using something this light, not because it's flashy or packed with features, but because it just gets out of the way and lets you focus on the screen.